Hi, everyone. I am Callie St. Clair, otherwise known as Consciously Callie on social media, and I'm excited to be here again today with Cailee Anello. And here we're going to be talking about part two of our awakening journeys. I am an essential oil educator and also a plant-based education workshop facilitator, as well as a yoga instructor. And Cailee is studying homeopathy, and she also does human design readings where she really goes deep into making concepts involving astrology and all kinds of modalities really applicable and easy to understand so that you can dive deeper into your own self-awareness. So we're here today to follow up with our last conversation, which was about each of our awakening journeys, since we both have kind of experienced that around the same time, around 7 years ago, where really since then we've started questioning a lot of things and started becoming more aware of ways to heal ourselves and to start questioning kind of the things going on around us. So yes, thank you for being here again with me today, Cailee.
Oh, of course. I'm so excited to dive into part two and more of our journey. Like we were kind of talking about before we started recording, is that there's just so many people who are going through this in 2020 because really, I mean, astrologically, they're saying it's like the same astrology as the fall of the Berlin Wall, the French Revolution. I mean, so many huge historical points in history. The signing of the Declaration of Independence happened under similar astrology. And so life as we know it is kind of gone. And now we have to pick up the pieces and figure out what we want to create moving forward in our own lives personally and as a collective. So timely, I think, our conversation.
Absolutely. And so speaking of that, so the energy around this year has been really heavy, as we talked about. It's been something that a lot of people have felt really low, and it almost feels like this giant traumatic experience that then brings kind of the underbelly, or like the hidden aspects of our culture that needed to be brought to the surface. And so a lot of people are realizing these things, and it's questioning their entire reality. So it can really feel like you don't know what's true anymore, like you don't know what's real anymore. And
Mm.
so we were kind of talking about this as well, but we've both had a few experiences, personal experiences in our lives that have been huge traumatic experiences. And I know many of you guys can relate to that, where you had something happen in your life that completely rattles your reality and shakes things up so that you view the world in a totally different perspective. And one of those for me and for you, which we found out that we have in common, was our concussions. So we
Mhm.
briefly brought those up in the last conversation, but we really didn't dive deep into those. So I would love to hear your full story here of what kind of happened with yours.
Yeah, and so the first time it happened to me, since I was like 6 years old, was into competitive ice skating. And so I was at the ice rink like 6 days a week, like took it really seriously. And when I got to be closer to, I think I was like 14 at the time, I started kind of questioning like if I wanted to continue it into high school, because it took up a lot of my time and I just wasn't really feeling it anymore. And sure enough, like things in my personal life were happening at the same time. Like it was just like a lot was changing around me in my personal life. And then it was like I was doing the simplest move ever. Like I was literally just what they call a bunny hop in skating, which is just like, lifting yourself off temporarily. It's like a very small jump. And it was just like a banana peel moment where I just went like, like right on the back of my head, like in my occipital, and I blacked out for like a couple of seconds. I don't know exactly how long because I was out. And I just woke up to people around me and they're like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And so that was the first concussion I had had, which kind of led to these weird episodes where I just started fainting, like, when something stressed me out, like in class or something, I would feel like I was going to faint. And so after the concussion, I would be like standing at a coffee shop with friends and like, we were listening to a talk somebody was giving. And before I know it, I'm back, like, fainting. And again, people standing around me like, what the heck is going on with you, And it's always like the same, like, occipital area. So that was really what, when I first had like mysterious health problems that led me to have to question like what was going on in my own body. And it was a big wake up call for me too, because, it was like, I've always been the person in my family to kind of sound the alarm when things are off. And at the time, my older brother was going through a serious addiction, and so there was a lot going on, and it was like I was always the one that was kind of like, we need to get him help. We need to wake up and like realize like something isn't right here. And because for a while, like, not to get too into their personal lives, but there was a lot of denial happening. And so I was kind of like, the bull in the china shop to be like, something's wrong. And for some reason, when I started having those health issues, it became a catalyst for my family too, to wake up and see that like my brother was in trouble too. So it was kind of a weird thing where it transformed my life personally. And then it kind of, transformed the life of my family. It was just a really chaotic time. And it's really interesting because it just made me realize, first of all, I didn't want to skate anymore. And it made me honest with myself about that, where I was like, it's time for me to take another path, And so that was the crazy thing around it. And of course, like, whenever I went to Western medical doctors, they always said I was fine. Like, they had no idea what was happening. They didn't really relay my fainting to my first concussion. And so that's kind of the weird thing is they're like, well, maybe you're anemic. I don't know. Like, they ran like all the neurological tests. And I was always kind of this like mystery in Western medicine, which I'm grateful for now, because I feel like it can be really hard when you get that like hard and fast diagnosis from Western medicine to ever see yourself as somebody who can heal. I'm sure you've had that in like your own life where people get diagnosed with like hypothyroid or like, I don't know, any number of conditions like arthritis. And it's like, as soon as they get that label, their health almost starts to get worse because then they see themselves as that label. And Western medicine says, oh, this is incurable. You'll live with this forever. So in a way, like, I'm kind of grateful that they couldn't figure it out, so that, I just kept digging into it myself, because then I really started researching more and more and just like knowing the track that I ultimately would go down in natural medicine. So kind of grateful for that. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of what happened. That was like the first time where I was like, oh, my health is kind of fragile, like, because when you're a
Right.
kid, you don't even think about it. You're like, oh, I'm indestructible, So
Absolutely. That's
it was,
so funny.
yeah, it was crazy.
It's so funny that we had such similar experiences with that being our wake up call, because I had a couple of them very similar in college, where I've actually had multiple concussions where all three were from fainting.
Mm,
So none of them had to do, I was an athlete. I played volleyball. I had all of these sports, and none of them were from something actually cool. Like, I didn't do any fun tricks. It was that at one point I was standing there and one of my classmates was just talking about somebody in the ER that he was job shadowing. And it wasn't even anything gory. It wasn't anything that would have normally sparked me to just faint and pass out.
yeah.
And so I knew that there were some underlying health issues that had to be going on, because it was the same thing where I hit the back of my head, where I actually leaned forward and passed out directly backwards onto a gymnasium floor. So
Ooh.
the assistant principal whipped around thinking that someone had taken a baseball bat and hit it against the floor, and it was my head. So an extremely painful wake up call. And just like you, I turned to Western medicine. I was severely concussed to the point where I couldn't look at light for a couple of weeks,
Yep.
where they ran all kinds of tests on me and they found that, I did have some like maybe urinary tract type symptoms where maybe I was dehydrated and had some things that may have sparked it, but really I feel like it was more of a spiritual message than anything else. Like I feel like it was my version of my soul's wake up call to say, hey, it's time to actually look at your health and to not just rely on Western medicine, which at the time I only knew existed. So my first concussion, I went to the doctor. My second concussion, I went to the doctor and ran all kinds of tests, of course, because after multiple fainting spells, you start to wonder if something's going wrong with you.
Yeah.
And so I got all these tests run and they couldn't find anything. They said,
Wow, you
"You
too,
are
huh?
healthy." Yep. They said, "You're healthy, like you're totally fine." And I was like, I don't feel healthy. I don't feel good. And so after those, I was extremely more open to other things because I realized, that something had to change in order to help me feel better. So I feel you so heavy on that, really like leading me on my path and really being like, hey, you need to wake up and you need to make some changes. You need to drink more water. You need to look at what you're eating, because I hardly drank any water. I hardly, ate breakfast. I would hardly eat fruits and vegetables. Like I would just eat a lot of processed foods. I would remember I would eat chocolate fudge dipped chewy granola bars every morning for breakfast.
Oh my
Just
God,
zero
yeah. Sounds
nutritional
familiar.
value. And so these concussions, which I am extremely grateful for, because again, they led me on that path, but also it was really neat to see the difference, because I actually did have a fainting spell after I had gotten started with doTERRA. And
Okay.
so I got to experience the difference in my recovery rate on like my pre oils and my post oils. So the first two concussions that I had, I would say the symptoms lasted for probably over a year and a half. And
Mhm.
that's not an exaggeration, because that was really when my depression started kicking in, which they say, like, when your brain
Okay, yeah.
rattles like that, it can completely shift your reality. And so I was on depression medication. I was on ADHD medication, because after those concussions, focus was the hardest thing for me. So even just I remember sitting down to read The Hunger Games, which was a book I loved to read. And it was a fun book. It wasn't like I was sitting trying to study something. It was a book that I wanted to read, and I could not even read past one sentence. And I just remember crying and bawling, because I was like, I want to be able to focus. And
Mhm.
then after my third concussion, was when I had my oils, and I started using the tools that I had. I started using my supplements. The first thing I said when I woke up was, grab my frankincense. And
Oh my
so
God.
I used my
Love
frankincense, I
that.
used my supplements, I, slathered myself in all these oils, and I had a little bit of a detox process. I'll admit, like I actually had
Mhm.
a little bit of a detox, but the symptoms lasted 6 days versus a
Wow.
year and a half of my quality of life. And so I knew that that was, the universe's way of letting me know, like, hey, you are on the right path. Like, these tools are meant to be for you. And so that was a huge, like everyone has kind of an aha moment when they use natural tools. They're like, oh, these work. And for me, that was a huge aha moment.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, similar journey because I couldn't find anything wrong with me physically. And because of the stuff going on in my family, they're just like, oh, you should just go to a psychiatrist, like we don't know what else to do with you, because after that, I definitely did have a couple of mental symptoms too. I didn't have the focus, but I just had general depression, and just kind of like it gave me anxiety about like, is it going to happen again? Like
Mhm.
being kind of nervous, in certain situations because I didn't want to faint again. And so I also was on antidepressants for a while and just kind of went through the ringer on that. And it was another thing where it just nothing, my system was so sensitive that they couldn't find like any medication that like either didn't make me like so sleepy to the point where I couldn't get off the couch, to like not want to go to school, because I was in high school at the time. And so it was just like it kind of just like got shelved and I didn't do anything about it. And then it was in college, which was like a similar but different instance happened where I think I had mentioned in the part one, that I had had an injury that led me to finally finding the natural health doctor in Chicago. So basically, for the full story of that, I had had a hip injury that wouldn't go away, and it would go from like my hip to then my opposite knee, because you're kind of like compensating for it when you're working out. And so I ended up going to this chiropractor that was just up the road from me from my college. And he was basically like, okay, like we really should just do like a full body adjustment because your whole system is kind of out of whack. And he was saying that like my cervical spine was off, of course, because of the concussions, something I hadn't really dealt with. And so basically, he was like this big dude. And it was kind of like one of those chiropractic offices where you have like 10 to 15 minutes with them. And then they're on to the next patient. So everything was happening so quickly that I didn't really have time to like consider my options. And so I was just like, okay, let's just do it. And he didn't warn me when he was going to give me my neck adjustment, which you can probably guess what's going to happen next. I tensed up during my neck adjustment and ended up having to go to the hospital, because basically, like, I still to this day don't exactly know what happened, but something with me tensing up, like there may have been a pinched nerve or something. But I was like literally like, I remember being in a cab in Chicago to go back to my dorm and just crying in pain. Like it was the most pain I'd ever been in my life. So it's like, okay, here again, I'm having some sort of head or neck injury when I'm on the wrong path. And because that was like years later, when I was in college, and I was actually going to school for neuroscience and psychiatry. And that was what I thought I wanted to do with my life. Like I was very sure of it. And then that happened, and went to the hospital. Once again, they couldn't find anything wrong. Like they did MRI, they did a PET scan. They're like, literally, we don't know why you're in pain. Here's a pain medication. Like, bye. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, literally, like, why do I keep getting these head injuries? And a side note is that I am an Aries moon and rising, and your sun, moon, and rising signs are really what you look to for first for like medical astrology. And so Aries rules the head. And so it's no surprise to me that like all of my most traumatic things have involved my head. Like even when I was a kid, I actually got bit by a spider at my grandparents' house and had to have like this like toxic spider bite removed when I was like 4. So like literally everything, all my
And that
ailments
was
have
on your
always been
head?
in my head.
And that spider bite was on your head?
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
So it's just, it's just kind of funny, a funny
That makes
aside.
me
But
curious for mine. Like,
yeah, what's your
my
moon
big
rising?
three is Virgo sun, Aquarius moon and rising.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head what Aquarius rules. I would look into it. It's really interesting because it's just like it's been really true for me, because the other injuries I've had, I've broken my toes like twice, and Pisces, which is my sun sign, rules the feet.
Wow. Isn't that so
So I don't know
crazy?
what's up with that. Like,
Yeah,
um,
that
you
makes
can
total
also look
sense.
at your Chiron placement in
Okay.
your astrological chart, and that'll give you an idea too about like what you're more prone to medically. So just something interesting, to look into, but
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely, because I know Virgo rules the gut because I had
Oh,
such
yeah.
experiences with that like, because I feel everything in my gut. And
Mhm.
so I struggled with digestive issues in that, as I said, in the last talk, with, struggling. And so that makes total sense. So now I'm gonna have to look up Aquarius and see kind of the relationship there too.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, because Pisces also rules viruses, ironically, infections of all kinds. And that was been my other thing is like sinusitis and like chronic, like I had so many ear infections as a kid and like everything like that, which is actually probably due to something else.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's just interesting. And I remember an astrologer talking about how there's some sort of astrological thing happening with Pisces right now. I wish I could remember it, but that she wasn't surprised at all when there was a viral outbreak this year because of that, because of Pisces. God, I wish I could remember what it was, but it just goes to show like your astrology and like what's going on astrologically as a collective is so real.
I've seen so many memes this year that have said like astrology isn't real, and then it says 2020. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
because everyone has predicted this that has
Uh-huh.
been into astrology. One of my favorite videos at the beginning of the year was Teal Swan
Mhm.
posted predictions for 2020,
Oh,
and
I didn't see
everything
that.
that she said was spot on. The divisiveness,
Mhm.
even the racial battles, everything
Mhm.
that she said was completely
Wow.
spot on.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what astrologers I was listening to were saying. And they were also saying, like, going into the age of Aquarius, is Aquarius is all about like the technological age and advancements in that. And like social distancing would be something that would be like a big thing, and like all these restrictions and weird things with AI and everything like that. And so I'm just like, what? Like, but it actually goes to show that as humanity, we're supposed to go through certain cycles and learn certain lessons. And it's like, who knows? Like, I remember getting an astrology reading, and we went back in time to when some of my like big health scares happened. And there were like crazy astrological conjunctions at the time, where it just goes to show like it may seem like all of these bad events like in 2020 and all of these traumatic events in your personal life are like it can make you feel like woe is me and kind of like in a victim mode and like why is this happening and why do I have to go through this, why, fuck 2020, like all of that. But it just goes to show like the astrology like in the universe is actually on your side, because I really truly believe that our souls sign up for certain lessons, and that the more that we're able to integrate the lesson the first time, the less bad that it has to get. But it's like we just were so on the wrong path in terms of like our world and humanity that we needed really big wake up calls. And in my life, I needed that big wake up call to completely shift my path, because I can only like if I hadn't gotten, especially that last injury with the chiropractor, and I hadn't met the natural chiropractor and herbalist and homeopath that I ended up working with for years in Chicago, like my life would be nothing like it is today. I can only imagine what my life would be. So thank God that I got injured, and thank God I got sick, because it's been my like really my driving factor to learn as much as I can. And it made me learn things so quickly, because it was like not my life, like I wasn't dying, but my quality of life, as you said, was on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the best examples that you can give with that is like a huge breakup, right? Like it's
Mhm, mhm,
so traumatizing at the time. You are just like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I am like sick to my stomach. I don't
mhm.
know what life is anymore. I don't know what to do with myself. And then a year goes past, 2 years goes past, and you look back and you were like, I am so grateful for that time. And so the
Yeah.
same thing can be said for every health condition that comes up for us is a message. Even the energy of this year, it's all a message that things
Mhm.
had to change because what path we were on was not sustainable,
No.
on an individual level, on a collective level, whatever it may be that comes up. But this year is just a prime example of that, like huge traumatic experience, some like a collective concussion for us all to, understand
A
a little bit
smack in the
more.
head. Wake
Yes.
up.
Yeah.
So true, because it's like that archetype of like the phoenix rising from the ashes, to be reborn from the destruction, and it's so necessary that like we all have to, let parts of ourselves fall away so that we can get to the core of who we really are. And that's why I love, tools like astrology and human design, so that you can get an idea of what you may have been taking for granted that are just like natural gifts and talents that you're supposed to be using. It can give you clues as to what path you maybe should be on if you just don't have a clue. Because I know there were times where I just didn't have a clue. I was like, I'm interested in these things, but I was all over the place in terms of like how I wanted to express those gifts. And so, and then, like if the astrology, say for a really, really tough year like 2020, you can better prepare yourself and better integrate the lessons, kind of like I was saying before. If you know what lessons are coming up and that this is a huge year of transformation and the old falling away so that the new can be born, you can kind of structure your life around that. And it's always better to go in the direction of flow rather than resisting the change and, trying your best to cling on to the past and cling on to what your life was before. It's so much easier if you surrender to it and go with the current of energy, because that's a lot of times what I see in my clients leads to burnout, is when they're like, no, I went to school for this. Like, this is what my life is supposed to be. I can't quit. I can't get out of it. Like, it's too hard. And it's like, if they realized how much easier their life would be a year from now if they just gave in and stopped resisting the change, I mean, it's incredible.
Yes, like those gut instincts that keep coming up, but yet we're resistant because it's a change, and that our bodies resist change because it's, even if it's miserable, it's familiar. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so that's one
Yep.
of the things that I have found like this year is that, people are saying, I want things to go back to normal after the
Yep.
election. Like things will go back to normal. I'm like,
Mhm.
what is normal?
Yeah.
Is normal the majority of the people here living in poverty, while we also have, a lot of countries that are completely well fed, and we have other countries that can't even find clean water. What is normal? And
Yeah.
so for me, one of the things that I think I've changed a lot with my perspective is that I almost look forward to the breakdown, because
Mhm.
I'm like, what beautiful things are going to come from this? Like, I
Yeah.
am like, what space is this making in my life? Or what space is this making to create something entirely new as a collective or on an individual level? So even when I see like, it's Mercury retrograde, or,
Mhm.
any of the retrogrades where I'm like, okay, there's going to be a little bit of, you know, questioning the way that I'm doing things, but what is that going to lead me to in the future? Because it's all meant to be, because it's all bringing things to the surface that need to change. And so I really am like grateful now for these like moments of breakdown. And so the quicker that we wake up, that's what I have seen about, this year too, is like the quicker you wake up, the more you just get to sit back and watch the show,
Yep.
because you just are like, I don't have to be so enveloped in this, and I don't have to be bought into the fear. Like I can sit back and observe and see, okay, this, what is going to come from this, and have that perspective rather than being resistant, like you said,
Mhm.
going against the current and just allowing what's meant to happen, what's going to happen, to go and be in that flow.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, because even if it's really painful, when there is such a current of change where change is just happening all around you, I find it so much better than those periods where you just feel stagnant. and stuck and like nothing's really happening. Like I had periods of that in 2019, I feel like, where I was just like, man, I really want this to shift, but like it's just not happening. Like, what the hell, you know? And so I'm almost like, oh, like, in the tarot, like when you pull the death card, that's like the card of transformation with the tower card as well. And people are like, oh shit, like, but it's like, no, like that's a good thing because it means that finally, like what you wanted to manifest into your life, what you wanted to happen is on its way. You just have to be willing to embrace the change and the turmoil and the uncertainty that can come in the in between, because that's what's scary is like, okay, the society as we know it is breaking down. Everybody can see it, whether you're on the right, whether you're on the left, whether you're not in politics at all. You know that like the world as we know it is crumbling. And so I think that's where the fear comes in is like, what's going to take its place. There's like this, in nature when there's a vacuum or like a hole, there's always going to be something that's going to take its place. Like you can't just have nothingness. There's always going to be something that comes from that nothingness. And so it can be scary in that in between of like being uncertain and not knowing what's going to come and not knowing what's going to be next, not knowing what your next step is. And I always like to say you just have to take the next right step. You don't have to know exactly where you're headed. You just have to take the next step in the right direction as it's presented to you. Because what I've seen in my personal life, especially this year, there's been so much uncertainty. And a lot of times I've had to make choices and decisions without knowing, what the final outcome will be. And I just have to take the next step. And eventually, the path unfolds and then you know where you're headed. But it can be really scary in those moments where you're like, my gosh, I have no idea what I'm doing or why, I lost my job or why I lost that relationship. Like, and it's like you look back in a few months' time, a year time, you're like, thank God, you know?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, speaking of all of this, I wanted to ask you what have been some of your favorite tools that you found that have helped you be so much more aware of yourself that we don't have to have these huge wake up calls
Yeah.
like severe concussions or severe hip
Mhm.
injuries, rather than, something like that, more just like, subtle things that we can then pay attention to so we can make changes before our messages become that much bigger and more dramatic.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so really, one of the first tools I used was hair analysis, which is a functional medicine test. And essentially, it just tells you the status of your minerals and your heavy metals. I mentioned it last time when we were talking about the V word, when I saw that there was a lot of aluminum in my hair. And so that's been really good for me. I get that done like 4 times a year, and it shows me if what I'm doing is working or if I need to adjust course. Because, for a long time, I had digestive issues as well. And I just wasn't absorbing my minerals. And so that led me to be a lot less resilient to stress. And so when you can't deal with stress, it's a problem because then you're less likely to want to make those leaps and changes in your life and take the risks. And you just don't feel up to it. If you don't have your health, it's like, you don't really have anything else. That's really the foundation. And so that was a big one for me is just checking in and having, it can be anything that resonates with you. I just really like hair analysis because it's just, what my practitioner did. And so I've continued doing that. And I've just noticed like, so essentially it stops me from going into that deep state of burnout or like um I know I'm on the right path with my health, which gives me peace of mind, especially, when you do have to have your immune system in top shape. Now you just have no idea what's happening. And so I really, really like that. But really the tools that have been my favorite are anything that connects me to my higher self. And that allows me to work with my subconscious, because that's ultimately what I've had to do to really make progress in my healing, is to see like where I'm self-sabotaging, what wounds from my past do I need to heal that are holding me back? What, familial patterns or generational patterns do I have to kind of alter or shift in my own life? Because I see this all the time in myself and my, clients, that a lot of times like history will repeat itself, and we'll end up on the same path as our family for one reason or another. It may look slightly different, but the same patterns happen over and over and over again. We all have that, where it's like, okay, why is this showing up for me again? And for everyone, it's different. It could be a specific health ailment. It could be a similar relationship dynamic that shows up over and over again. And so it's different for everybody. But so the tools that I've used for that have been tarot, learning how to read tarot for myself, um, learning astrology and human design, um, taking, let's see, what else have I done? So, really looking at my dreams and dream journaling, I found especially this year, because I feel like my dreams have been so much more vivid this year. I don't know about you. But it's like I've gained so much from my dreams this year. And the more that I started journaling them down, the more I ended up remembering them, and it really showed me like what I'm still holding on to. And again, patterns I need to shift that I was not aware of whatsoever in my waking life. Things that you think you've moved past in your life, and then you dream about it and you're like, ooh, that's still a sore spot. Like there's still more to unravel there. Um, which leads me to talking a little bit about homeopathy, because that is ultimately like what I'm training to do, primarily in my business, is homeopathy. And essentially, when you're doing homeopathy, a lot of people think it's just like another form of natural medicine, like herbalism or something, where you take a remedy and it heals you. So the really cool thing about homeopathy is it actually is an energetic medicine. And the premise of homeopathy is that there's something in nature that is the same vibration as your physical ailments and your mental ailments. And that when you find that right remedy, it will cure you, because the vibrations cancel each other out. And so essentially, the best example I like to give of this is that, say you get stung by a bee, you can actually take a homeopathic of that. Say you take like the homeopathic of bee venom, it will heal your bee sting, because again, like cures like, they cancel each other out. It basically sends a message to your vital force or your healing energy within you to say, hey, there's something wrong there. Let's focus all our energy on healing that. And so essentially, when I started working with a homeopath and going to school for it, you're basically having like a therapy session. But instead of it being like therapy where they give you a game plan and they tell you what to do and they try to like fix you, he's just there listening and trying to find the best remedy to match your symptom picture so that you can shift out of it. And so it's been the deepest experience I've had with really getting in touch with myself and healing, because first of all, you have to be really open with your homeopath to like find the right remedy. Because let's say that you're going to a homeopath for a headache. Um, what you're experiencing psychologically and what you've experienced in your life is going to make a big difference as to what remedy you get, because everybody's headache is stemming from something different in their life. And that's why, when people have traumatic events happen, oftentimes physical symptoms will come with it in the end, because the body is saying, hey, you never dealt with this trauma. I'm going to give you a physical symptom to, again, wake you up, and so that you deal with it. And so, there's like a homeopathic for headaches for people where it started after a breakup, or maybe their headache is worse in cold climates versus hot climates, or maybe their headache is worse around their cycle. So there's probably like 1,000 remedies that somebody could get for a headache based on their constitution, based on their mental picture. And in homeopathy, we always say that your mental picture is actually more important than your physical symptom. So, like, what are your triggers? That will give you insight into what your homeopathic remedy is, because there's something in nature that's resonating with exactly what you're experiencing. And essentially, it's really out there, I know, but you're essentially taking the consciousness of that, say, that plant. And when you ingest that, it wakes you up to your own healing power. And it works similar to like rescue remedy or floral essences, gem remedies. There's so many like them where it's like, certain flowers in nature are really good for grieving. Some are really good for anxiety. And it's like, it really showed me that nature gave us everything that we need to heal psychologically too. And that, everybody deals with things differently. And it can just really help to wake you up to your specific patterns and what you really need to do to heal. And then the remedy just helps to wake you up and wake up that internal healing mechanism that you already have and really heals you from the inside out. And it's crazy. It's something that you really have to experience. It almost reminds me of experiences that people have had taking plant medicine like ayahuasca or something like that, even like psychedelic mushrooms without like the visual effects. Because how when people take plant medicine and they're like, oh my gosh, I lost my fear of death, like all this trauma came up that I didn't realize I had to deal with. It's very similar to that, again, without the psychedelic effects, where it's like you take this homeopathic remedy and it wakes up, it's like opens this Pandora's box of like these memories, and it helps your body to process them instead of repress them. I hope that made sense.
Absolutely. Yes, I was deep in what you're saying, and
Yeah.
it's so true and so funny how we know that every single person has different reasons why they have the physical ailments that they do.
Yeah.
But when you say go to Western medicine, it is a one size fits all.
Yeah.
You get maybe a few minutes and you get a pain medication for a headache versus,
Yeah.
using these homeopathic remedies or using essential oils where you're like, one thing may not work for you because it could be a hormonal headache or it
Hmm.
could be,
Hmm.
something again that is emotions based, which of course we know everything is emotions based.
Hmm.
And one of the kind of stemming off of that, one of the books that I highly recommend for people to really dive deeper into what physical things are speaking to us about is this book called Soul Speak by
Ooh.
Cannon. So
Ooh.
many people may have heard of Dolores Cannon. She
Hmm.
really talks about this new earth and the awakening that we're going through and moving into five-dimensional consciousness. And this is her daughter. And Dolores Cannon was actually the founder of quantum healing hypnosis therapy.
Hmm.
And so I'm going to be diving deep into that. I've actually got a one-on-one Zoom scheduled with my QHHT practitioner to
Oh,
really
cool.
dive deep into that. But she's the one who really turned me on to this book. And so this is great because it goes through every body system and kind of what the messaging is meant to tell us. So you can look it up by, if you've got something physical going on, or even something that we think of as being coincidental, like a car accident.
Hmm.
Everything has a meaning. Everything is a way of telling us, we are going in the right direction, or maybe we need to make some adjustments. So they say, if you're hit in a car straight on, then you're supposed to stop with whatever it is that you're doing. Or if
Hmm.
you're hit to the side, maybe you're supposed to veer your path a little bit. Or if you're hit from the back, you're supposed to get going and speed up, what it is that you're doing. And so when you start to think of health in more of those terms, it just makes, again, those messages so much more subtle so that you don't have to have those dramatic accidents or those dramatic concussions or, big things happen in our lives.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly what I see, because I shadow the homeopath a couple times a week, and it's just amazing to me. I mean, every case just like blows my mind because to really bring this to life, I'll give an example I saw recently. There was a patient who was experiencing a lot of headaches and focus issues and insomnia. And so basically, through the session, we came to learn that his line of work was essentially repeating another family trauma. So he had grown up with a lot of addiction in his family and ended up being an addiction counselor. And so through working with the homeopathic remedies, he's slowly coming around to like, oh my God, wait, I didn't even realize that I'm like playing out my trauma every single day in that addiction unit. And that's what's giving me my physical symptoms. And so gradually, I've seen his physical symptoms lessening and lessening with the remedy because he's understanding why his body is giving him those physical symptoms in the first place. I mean, seen it with cancer patients as well. Like, the root cause could be something as simple as they never felt like they fit into society. And so they ostracize themselves, and that deep, deep wound of not fitting in manifested in cancer sometimes. I mean, it can really be that. And it blew my mind. And at first I was like, can that really be the cause of something? But then I see people get better once the homeopathic heals that deep wound, where it's like all of a sudden he's making friends easier and then his symptoms are going away and he feels connected to the world. And it's like, holy shit, like this is real. Like that, there is a root cause to your symptoms that isn't as simple as, changing your diet or like all the typical things. Like there's a deeper reason for all your physical symptoms.
Yes, definitely. One of the first stories that comes to mind as you were saying that was I actually met someone who was doing the standard Western medicine route when she got cancer, and she was going to treatments. And essentially, the doctors were like, there's really not a whole lot more for you that we can do, but we're going to still like, we want to still keep giving you this, chemo and
Mhm.
radiation. And she was to the point where she couldn't get out of bed. She just had no quality of life. And she basically said, I would rather die or try to treat this myself than to keep going on this path where
Mhm.
I don't have any quality of life. And so she did a lot of those things that you would normally think of, like adjusting diet and throwing out a lot of things in the home that are toxic.
Mhm. Mhm.
Even things like ceramic plates, I had no idea, like the pesticides and things on like our
Oh, really?
cooking materials and plates. And so she switched to like bamboo things. And so
Mhm.
a lot of those that you would normally think of like reducing toxins, but also she wrote forgiveness letters because they say cancer is anger manifested in the body,
Mhm.
which of course
Mhm.
you said, like, not fitting in, probably a lot of that is anger towards other people or maybe even anger towards yourself.
Mhm.
So that is going to, they say, like manifest almost like anger. It really is a cancer. It's like, when you're angry at somebody or unforgiving towards somebody, that's like, they say it's like holding hot coal and expecting the other person to get burned. And so
Yeah.
hold on to all of those things, that's going to manifest in our physical body.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. And so it's just so interesting because everybody's body is so unique and you can take 50 persons, 50 people with the same exact trauma and it's going to manifest differently in their body and like how they respond to it and how they essentially when you aren't healthy, you have all these layers of adaptation that you have to work through because without you realizing it, you've adapted to your inner unhealthy state with coping mechanisms that may or may not be healthy for you. And you just think that that's you. And
Mhm.
then, through whatever means of healing you want to take, where you finally, you're raising that vitality in you, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, wait, I didn't realize that I was, without realizing it, making myself an outcast in this case or holding in that anger. I didn't realize I'd never forgiven those people. I didn't realize the harm that I was doing to myself with all these things because the first step to healing is awareness. And that's what I found working with homeopathy is like it made me aware of things I didn't even know I should be aware of,
Yeah. And the same thing I think with human design that really woke me up
Yeah.
to being aware of certain things that, again, are going to come more naturally to me that maybe I
Yeah.
take advantage of and
Yeah.
don't necessarily see as much in myself, but also some of those things that I am going to need to, maybe not like struggle with, but maybe things that patterns and things that I'm going to need to address. So
Mhm.
I love that human design. Like for one, I love the fact that it's the chakras and it's a
Yeah.
combination of, even the I Ching with like, I
Mhm.
really resonate a lot with, Chinese medicine
Mhm.
because they, agree that our, you know, kidneys are fear and that
Yeah.
all of these emotions manifest in our physical body. And so really looking into more of that and again, like studying your human design can really help to see kind of your patterns and where it is that you want to be going.
Yeah, actually, speaking of like the healing journey and everything like that with human design, a big pivotal point for me too, in my healing journey was understanding that there are gates in my human design where it actually helps my physical body heal to use my gifts for healing other people. And so that was huge for me because I got stuck in this story where I have to be 100% healthy to help heal other people. And I see so many people get trapped in that where they're like, I'm not ready because I still have this I'm working on. It's like, no, 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 no. Like, if anything, working with people has increased my energy. It's helped me further along in my healing journey than I ever thought. And so I'm sure there are other people who need to hear this. Like, don't wait until you think you have it all figured out
Because we'll
to
never have it
start
figured out.
helping.
We'll
No.
never have it all
Like
figured
I'm still, I still work with my homeopath. I'm still healing so many different things because it's a lifelong journey. And it's something that I'm eternally grateful for. And it just keeps shifting me to better and bigger things. And so, something like your human design chart can really help you as, like you were saying, where you're holding yourself back or where your gifts lie that you don't even realize because it's counterintuitive. Like, I wouldn't have thought that using my healing gifts would help to heal me,
out.
working with other people because you think, oh, it's going to, expend a lot of energy. And like, do I have the energy for this? And it's like, actually you'll get energy from using those gifts. So it's really interesting. And there's so many like amazing things like that within a chart that can really help to shift you and shift your limiting beliefs that you didn't realize you had.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I think that that held me back for a long time too. I struggled
Hmm.
with skin issues for a very
Hmm.
long time and I was really afraid to be seen because I was like, people are going to say, who is she
Yep.
to talk about this? But
Hmm.
in reality, we all are on a different place in our journey where our voices are so necessary for the people who are where we were.
Hmm.
And so you
Exactly.
don't have to speak to everyone. You just need to touch those that were where you were at.
Yep.
And so, even if you're just one step ahead of somebody else, your knowledge is so needed.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's something that I really, really had to come to realize because I was in the same place. I was like, oh my gosh, you feel like a fraud in some ways. You're like, oh, well, I don't have it all figured out and I have this or that symptom. But it's like, I had to really realize, like, oh my gosh, like, but I've been doing this for 7 years and you can come to take for granted what you know, and then you talk to other people and they're like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much for telling me about that healing practice that you take for granted." And you're like, "Oh my gosh, wait, people really, really, really need this." And it's almost like selfish of me to not use my voice because it's going to help somebody else and just to get out of your own way and be like, you know what? Like, this is what I'm here to do. And so it doesn't matter, what I look like or what I sound like, or if I make a mistake or if I don't have it figured out. It's like, doesn't matter. It's like you said, you just have to know more than who you're trying to help. And like us doing this for the last 7 years, it's like, man, you learn a lot. You learn
Yeah.
a lot.
And you really do start to take advantage of the fact that you do know. And
Mhm.
so because you have that knowledge, we tend to think that everyone else has
Yeah.
that too. It's almost
Yeah.
like that imposter syndrome that I
Mhm.
had of,
Mhm.
you know, who am I to talk about this? Like I know nothing compared to these people.
Yeah.
And so it's that comparison game of, people may even be watching this and think, I could never do this. I could never talk about these subjects. But as soon as you start taking that first action step and
Mhm.
you look back a year from now, 5 years from now, 7 years from now, you're like, wow, I am so grateful that I started on this journey investigating myself and started learning more about me and these modalities so that, you are to this place. And there's so many tools and so many people out there to help speed up our journeys and that now that
Mhm.
it's a journey worth taking.
Yeah, so I'm gonna send that question right back to you. What are your favorite modalities that you've used along your journey?
So I would say one of them definitely was QHHT because, as you said, anything connecting me to my higher self.
Mhm.
So it first started, of course, with meditation that really, led me down this path. And meditation is something that I must do every day in order to feel like I am really connected to, my soul, into like my spirit, so that I can really take steps forward that don't make me feel like I'm running on a treadmill and not
Mhm.
really moving forward. So meditation and yoga as well, because of course yoga was something that I became more open to after meditation because I found that it actually deepened my meditation practice because it helped to slow my mind down and not be so in my head and be so anxious. Because as you said, being anxious about whether or not I'm healthy, anxious about whether or
Mhm.
not I'm going to get another concussion, so when I started meditating and started doing yoga, there was a lot less of that like fear and limiting beliefs and that were coming through. And so one of the things that I have found too is that essential oils have been a huge tool for me, not just for, supporting my physical body and its ability to heal itself, but also to just give me that little mindful moment. Like
Mhm.
even something like rose is a huge heart opener. So I'll roll this under, my behind my ears and over my heart before I do a meditation and just breathe it in, because we know that we have our olfactory senses in our body that are directly connected to our memory and to our emotions. And so when I smell just an uplifting oil or like a soothing floral oil, you can't help but feel better. Like I'll
Mhm.
even find myself now, having the tools to address like anger. I was a very angry child. And so now, when I'm in that headspace where I can feel that like heat, that internal like heat rising, I take a drop in my palms and I'll just rub them together and give myself that little mindful moment. And so for me, it's not only a tool like from that scientific perspective of helping with the memory and emotions, but it's also helpful to just take a moment to take a deep breath,
Mhm.
because so much of the time we get caught up in our day-to-day life and we never stop to just take a moment to take a deep breath. And so when we stop and just take that drop of oil and we breathe it in, we are anchoring ourselves to the present moment. So for me, that has helped tremendously, rather than, constantly thinking about what I need to do in the future, or, fretting about what I said 7 years ago that I was embarrassed by, thinking about the past and, replaying conversations in your head that you wish had gone differently. So I just don't have those as much because I have these tools that help me kind of be in that present moment. So I love those, as well as, like I said, finding different tools to help me understand my body a little bit more, like Soul Speak. And I'm also going to recommend the book Feelings Buried Alive, Never Die.
Oh, cool.
So it goes really deep into, our physical bodies again, storing our emotions and our feelings, and then how to kind of talk to ourselves to then regenerate. And it's all it is a script at the end. So you can download the app or you can get the book. The app is called Healing Feelings. So that's something that, like, whenever I have something come up, like recently my right hip, like my right hip flexor specifically has been
Mhm.
a little bit tight. And
Mhm.
so the first thing I did was, all right, what's going on now? Like what emotions are coming up for me now?
Mhm.
And so I immediately get on my app and I look at the hip and I look at the right side. And of course, the right side is the masculine and the left side is
Mhm.
the feminine. And so I saw, that it said, I'm afraid to take steps forward. And of course, masculine is being in the doing. And so,
Mhm.
not taking those steps forward like I should be. And so when I am taking those steps forward, I notice that my right hip isn't hurting. But when I'm questioning myself and when I'm in my own head, I notice that message, that pain coming up for me.
Yeah, and it's exactly right. Like when we have symptoms, it can be so easy to kind of be like, what am I doing wrong? And kind of beat ourselves up about it. Like, especially for those people listening who have been on their natural health journey for a while, which I'm sure a lot of people are, where they're just like, oh my gosh, what did I eat? What did I do? Like, you kind of like get caught up in this perfectionistic, like, almost like you did something, you're afraid to make mistakes because like it'll lead to a physical symptom. And
Mhm.
so really, if you just see it like you were saying, where it's a message and it's not something you did wrong, it's just your body trying to get you back on the right path. It's just like in human design where there's 5 energy types. And I know I haven't really gotten into human design, but there are 5 different energy types, and there's a specific emotion for each energy type that will come up when they need to readjust course. And so for me as a generator, it'll be frustration, like I was saying before, like that feeling stuck and stagnant, and like you want to push ahead, but nothing's flowing. These emotions and these bodily aches and pains are all just trying to get you to connect and to get you to see what's coming up that you automatically want to repress without realizing it, or like just continue on with your day. And it's like, it really is a messenger, and can help you really to get on track a lot faster than if you just try to ignore it, and let it build. It's like, okay, now I know what's going on. Like that's 100% accurate. It's like I was doing that thing, and it's like now I can have awareness of it. So I know when I'm doing that again, and I can course correct a lot quicker than I used to because I have awareness of it.
Right. Or rather than masking it, which
Yeah.
we tend to do, as you said last time, of we're not really taught to feel anything. As soon as
Yeah.
something comes up, we're like, okay, what can I take to diminish or just mask that pain rather than
Yeah.
sitting with it and going deeper into it to really understand what it's trying to tell you?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, with feelings too, where you're saying you're an angry kid, like certain feelings that are more volatile like that in our culture are really, really frowned upon. And
Mhm.
then they end up affecting you internally. Like, like anger is oftentimes we have so much liver stagnation and that heat, and you don't know what to do with it because we weren't really taught what to do with certain emotions. We were taught like maybe to cry when we're sad, and like we love joy and happiness and we embrace those. But things like anger, it's like, oh, this is a dangerous emotion that I can't feel. You associate it almost with like being violent or like being a bad person, and it's like, no, it's good. It's good. And you can use it as fuel. You can fuel that anger into a creative project, or, you can pound your pillow, or like, like just get that rage and frustration out that so many of us are probably feeling right now with like the lockdowns and like everything happening. There's a lot of anger and frustration. It's like allow yourself to feel it, and I think, releasing the energy through something like yoga or a brisk walk or anything is so important too. But make friends with those emotions and with those pains, because they're your ally, and they're really there to help guide you. They're not there to just like punish you.
Exactly. Well, I feel like this was an amazing conversation. And I'm so excited to continue on with different topics. Uh,
Yeah.
Next time, we can maybe dive deeper into kind of what historical events maybe started
Mhm.
having us question things.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we're going to also dive a lot deeper into human design and astrology. So, is there any last parting words or anything else that you would like to add?
I would just say, just speaking astrologically again with anger, with the Mars retrograde happening until November 14th, you're going to see a lot more anger and aggression in the world around you and maybe in yourself about past events coming up. It may be a lot easier for you to want to, get into Facebook battles with people or to be aggressive on the road and just understand where it's coming from and really just carve out more time and space to connect to yourself than even you normally would. Do your favorite grounding practices, take salt baths, take magnesium. Some frankincense never hurt anybody. That's definitely one of my go-tos as well. It just automatically makes me feel uplifted and in my body. And so just understand what's happening and don't freak out about it. And just, you got this. It's all for a reason, all the things that are happening in your personal life and on the collective, and just be kinder to people, even if they have different beliefs than you. It's so easy to they want to pin us against each other, and just the amount of name calling and censorship is just ridiculous. And I think we just really need to ground ourselves so that we can come together in a better way, and so that we can really use this time wisely as a collective. So that's kind of what my final thoughts are.
Absolutely. I love that. So thank you again, Kaylee, and I so look forward to our next conversation as well.
Yeah, bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening and tuning in.